Mrs. Klett, and this is the study review for events 31 through 35, especially for those of you that could not make the study group the other night. The first thing to know are your dates, and we're getting more and more dates all the time. That means they're worth more and more on your test. So make sure that you know your dates inside and out. I have sent you a link to the acronyms, and you can also find them on InGrade if you go up the top of the page to apps and go to flashcards. No. You can do the flashcards, and the flashcards will probably help you more than anything else, not only now, but on your final test. But I have sent you a file of the acronyms, so please study those. Make sure you know your dates inside, out, over, under, and through. Okay, I need to know the leader of the campaign of the Crusaders in the Fourth Crusade, and I'll give you a hint. He was a marquis of somewhere. And the purpose of the attack on Constantinople had changed from just retaking the Holy Land and Jerusalem from the Muslims to, and there were several things involved in that Fourth Crusade that the Christians turned to where they did other things than just trying to retake the Holy Land and Jerusalem. One was the conquest. They wanted to take over Egypt, and one was to squash the Eastern Church, but there was a big thing as well. It should be in your notes, and if not, it's in the notes I've given you. After the Crusaders were victorious in Constantinople, if you want to call that a victory, what happened to the town? What did they do in the town? And the attack on Constantinople involved, what was it that was really awful about that whole thing? You know, when people go after their own people. Well, tell me about that in Constantinople. Where was St. Francis from? What town and what country? Francis had a great love for something, and I don't know about your church, but ours has a blessing of these every year. And what kind of guy was Francis before he heard God talking to him to take up a mission for the Lord? That was before. What was he like before? And there was a woman who started a convent, was patterned after St. Francis. What was her name? What were some of the things brought before the Fourth Lateran Council? Who was the Fourth Lateran Council called by? I'll give you a hint. It was a pope. How's that? Which one? Tell me who attended the Fourth Lateran Council. And what was, how could you gain forgiveness of sins according to the Fourth Lateran Council? Okay. One of the purposes of the Fourth Lateran Council was to plant virtues so that people would be more virtuous. They wanted to get rid of vices in the church, but they also wanted to remove something. And if you were a person that was like this, killing of you could gain something for the murderer. According to the Fourth Lateran Council, what did they do that was awful for the Jews and the Muslims? Which reminds us very much of the Nazis and the Jews, what they did to the Jews. In the beginning of the 1200s AD, that would be the beginning of the 13th century, Where was the church in influence and power? High, low, declining? Where was it? Boniface VIII. What was his big deal? What did he want? Was he a kind person? Was he greedy for power? What kind of guy was he? When the two kings, King Edward I of England and King Philip IV of France, went to war, it was over a fishing conflict. Now, we know that that was not just your everyday, oh, let's go throw the line in the water and see what we get. This was a major industry. And they were fighting over an area to fish in. And when they had this, and they went to war over it, what did they do that made Boniface so angry? And did he agree to do that? And King Philip, because he got upset with Boniface, what did he do? He stopped the flow of something, and then he did some other things to Boniface. What did the disagreement of the kings with Pope Boniface VIII, what did that begin in the church's power? What did it start to do? Who was raped in the sacking of Constantinople? Well, probably women were, but specifically who? That was really awful. Who did Francis feel had commissioned him to preach the kingdom of heaven and to own nothing? Who did he think had told him that? And was his father really proud of him? Did he think it was a great thing? What did the council, the Fourth Lateran Council, adopt as church doctrine that we believe still today? Did the Greek church attend the council? How were people at that point in time? They were not using abortion. They didn't have the medical technology that we have today to make it relatively safe. So what did they do instead of abortion? Now, the Crusaders in the Fourth Crusade became beholden to Venice because they had fallen into what? Because there weren't enough guys to come and pay them. There was a time that lasted from 879 to 1054 when there was no mention of the split between the Eastern and Western Church. That was called the period of cold something. You need to know that. And there were two big something that destroyed much of Constantinople during the attack. What were those? They were the same thing, but there were two of them. Who was the guy that ran the ragtag army before the First Crusade? They were not successful, and his name was Peter the what? Assisi is in what country? There might be Assisi there too, I don't know, but Assisi is in what country? The small chapel that Francis felt that God spoke to him was called what? The tiny chapel that the Pope gave Francis and his friars to work out of was called what? And that means little portions. What was the doctrine that was passed by the Fourth Lateran Council that states that the change of bread and wine turns into the true body and blood of Christ? and it can only happen by a priest who's been properly ordained. What did the council declare should be paid before taxes? Now, Boniface VIII objected to paying something over the war between the two kings. And what did King Philip charge Boniface with, and later arrested him for? Now we're down to our how this affects us as Christians today. So please go through each of your events. Make sure that they state what you're stating is specifically how this affects us today. Not back then, not what went on and on. I mean, you can go through that, but you need to say this affects us today in what way. Okay? The reason this is, that I'm trying to get you to come up with why it's an important date in our Christian history. Because all of these have affected us somehow. So just go through your 5 dates and go through those. Okay? Alrighty. God bless you. Good night.